Hi all, welcome to i-tutor Academy. In today's session, we will start with the Unit 10, subsection 3 of MMPC 010, that is factors determining the nature of competition. So we have already seen that the number of fames and product differentiation are extremely crucial in determining the nature of competition in market. So it has been tactically uh, assumed that there are a large number of buyers. What would happen if there are several fames producing standardized product but only one buyer? And obviously the buyer would control the price. He will dictate how much to buy from whom, and the entire price volume decision take on a different qualitative dimension. And similarly, product features and characteristics, the nature of production system, the possibility of new entrants in market have profound impact on competitive behavior of fame in a market. The entry of new fame has special relevance in business behavior, which we discussed in the next section, and deal with other issues in the present one. So, effect of bias. So, what is the effect of bias? So, we have already referred to the case where there is only one buyer. Such a situation has been referred to as monosony. And for example, there are just six fames in India manufacturing railway wagons, all of which supply to just one buyer. So, the railway. And such a situation can also exist in a local labor market where a single large fame is the only provider of job for the people in the vicinity. So more frequently encountered in the Indian market is a case of a few large buyer defined as oligo. So okay, OLIGOPSONY, and the explosive industry which makes detonators and commercial explosive has three major customers: coal India and Department of Irrigation and various governmental agencies working on a road building activities. Of these, just one customer, CIL, take nearly 60% of the industry's output. So there are about 10 fame in the industry which negotiate prices and quantities with CIL to finalize their short-term plans. And most industries manufacturing heavy equipment in India are typically dominated by a few manufacturer and few buyer, with uh, the government being the major buyer. Price and volume determination in such product often take the form of negotiation across the table rather than the operation of any market forces, since the members in the whole market inclusive of buyers and sellers are not many. Very often key know each other. In other situations like the consumer goods, fames have no direct contact with their customers. And next is production characteristics. Minimum efficient scale, that is MES, of production in relation to the overall industry output and market requirements sometimes play a major role in shaping the market structure. MES is the minimum scale of output that is necessary for a firm to produce in order to take advantages of economies of scale. Example is here. And the reason why there are no more than, say, around 10 integrated steel plant even in an advanced countries like USA can be partially explained by economies of scale and thus MES. And since the minimum economic size of such a steel plant is few very million tons, and the entire world steel industry can have no more than 100 efficient and profitable fail. So thus every country has only a handful of steel plants. On the other hand, when one come to rolling mills which take the steel billets or bars as input, the minimum efficient size comes down considerably, and given the existing demand, several frame can be seen to operate. And further, the minimum size or does not remain constant but changes drastically with the technological advancements. When technical changes push up the economic size of a plant, one notices that the number of fame decline over time. And this can be noticed in some process industries like synthetic fiber. Conversely, technological innovations may take it possible for smaller sized plants to economically viable. In such a case, a lot of new entrants come, and soon the market became highly competitive, as has happened in the personal computer industry in India. Apart from minimum plant size. Factors like the availability of the required raw material, skilled labor, etc., can also mold market structure. Likewise, enough skilled people are not available to work on the sophisticated machines. These factors sometimes restrict output and push up prices, even though adequate market potential for expansion exists. And next is product characteristics. What is product characteristics? We have already stated that the product differentiation is an important market characteristics because it indicates a firm's ability to affect price. If a fame product is perceived as having unique features, it can command a premium price, and the fame is said to possess market power. Example is here. So please go through your IGNOU study material also. And conflict between physical characteristics and minimum economic size. An interesting question arises in the case of a product like a cement. For reason of minimizing the transport cost on raw material, most cement plants in the country are located near mine sites. A large, efficient plant near a mine site can manufacture cement at a optimum cost, but the local demand is never large enough. So, if such a plant has to sell in far away market from Gujarat to Kerala, example, the transport cost can be quite high. So customers located in such a area will always buy cement at a much higher price, and the government partly offset this by using the mechanism of levy price, which is the same throughout the country. Okay, so here is one chart: different structural variable, number of independent seller and buyers, degree of seller concentration, product differentiation is their condition of entries here. Okay, so please go through this and it will be more clear. And the next is barriers to entry. So what is barriers to entry? Market selection and entry and exit. So market selection process include fame's entry, then its survival, and finally the exit process. The selection and expansion depends how efficient the fame is, and the efficient fame enter and the inefficient one exit. So conditions of entry: the entry of a new fame in an industry or a market depend on the ease with which it can enter. If we see the long term perspective, the number of fames and the degree of seller concentration depends on the conditions of entry. And in case of free entry, the number of seller is large in number, and in case of restricted entry, the number of sellers tended to reduce. And the long run, the degree of competition depends on the condition of entry. A new entrant could bring with it the following advantage: one is provides new goods and services, changes the balance between different sectors, and comes with the new technological and managerial techniques and increases opportunities. Next is factors determining conditions of entry. The following are some of the factors that determine the structure of any market. This list is not meant to be exhaustive, but is likely to cover a large part of real world situation. So legal barriers, initial capital cost, vertical integration, optimum scale of production, production differentiation are the factors determining the condition of entry. So legal barriers, almost all countries have their set of rules and regulations, and patent law is one such a regulation which promotes protect the interest of investors and innovators. So it's all based on law. Okay, and next is initial capital cost. For industries producing basic input like a coal, steel, power, etc., the initial capital cost is quite high. So therefore, it become difficult for new entrepreneur to enter. So in industries where the capital requirement is high, the market is dominated by a few fame. Whereas for industries such as non-durable consumer goods, the initial capital cost is less, and therefore the number of fame in the market can be quite large. Next is vertical integration. The vertical integration fame is one that produces raw material and intermediate product as well as the final product, and that is vertical integration. Example is here. Please refer your study material. And Sale and Tisco, DMart and supermarket chain, these are the example of vertical integration. Next is optimization. Optimum scale of production means that the scale of output at which the long run and average cost of production is minimum. As defined earlier, this is the minimum efficient scale of production for the fame. Okay. Next is product differentiation. So in product differentiation, new entrants face difficult to enter the market where the product are highly differentiated. Consider an example of a popular ready-to-eat breakfast cereal company. Okay. So related to entry conditions is the concept of entry barriers, and any manager is concerned about his fame market share and thus threat to its competitive position. By establishing an entry barrier, a fame not only preserve its market share but could also increase it. And a barrier to entry exit when new fame cannot enter a market. There are many type of barriers which become sources of market power for fames. Entry barriers can be broadly classified, that is natural barriers, legal barriers, and strategic barriers. Natural barriers, economic of scale created a natural barriers to entry of new fame, and it occurs when the long run average cost curve of a fame decrease over a large range of output in relation to the demand for the product. So due to the existence of substantial economies of scale, the average cost at a smaller rate is so high that the entry is not profitable for small scale fames, and this result in existence of natural monopoly. And power generation, aircraft manufacture, railway, etc. are example of natural monopolies. Next is legal barriers. Patent, as discussed above, are an example of a legal entry barrier, and industrial licensing that used to be common in India in the 1970s and 80s in another example of such a barrier. So here is figure 10.1, that is entry limit pricing, and here one more is there. These are the entry limit pricing figure. So here is price and cost, here is potential entrant. So this is output is here in this x axis. Okay, here also price and credit in y axis, and this is output in x axis. So this picture is related to established fame, this is potential entrant. And next is strategic barriers. Such a barriers exist exclusively due to the strategic behavior of existing fame, and managers undertake the investment to deter entry by raising the rival's entry cost. To bar or restrict the entry of a new entrant, an established fame may change price lower than the short run profit maximizing price. And this strategy is known as the entry limit pricing. The entry limit pricing depend on established fame taking a cost advantage over a potential entrance. And the established fame must have a long run average cost curve below that of the other fame in order to lower its price and continue to make an economic profit. Example is here, please go through it. And building excess capacity. What is building excess capacity in this? And another way to restrict the entry is to build and maintain excess capacity over and above the required amount. This process a threat to the new entrant, deliberating the fact that the establishing fame prepared to increase the output and lower the price if and when entry occurs. The excess capacity can be built up easily as it take a longer time for the new entrant to build a factory of such a capacity. This type of barrier is also known as capacity barrier to entry. Next is producing multiple products. And economies of scope arise when cost of producing two or more goods together is less costly than producing the two goods separately. The process goes on and become cost effective as more goods are produced. This act as entry deterrent for a new fame. Next is new product development. Producing a substitute for its own product in the market can discourage the entry for the new fame. For example, a consumer good company producing different type of soap targeted to different customer base, and the more the number of substitute, the lower and more elastic is the demand for any given product in the market. This makes the entry of a new fame more difficult. So take the case of Microsoft. Why does every other personal computer or laptop that one comes across is Microsoft Windows compatible? The PC cannot work without Windows. So by developing industry level standards, Microsoft has created high switching cost in an attempt to create entry barriers. Okay. So activity 2 is based on the subsection. Please go through it. And next section is strategic entry barriers, a further discussion. Okay, so no one like a competition and companies with a leading position in a market will go to considerable length to keep out likely new opponents. So, although all companies strive to develop one form of competitive advantage or another, and relatively few are persistently successful over long period. And innovative activity is almost always followed by wave of imitation, and relatively few first movers are able to maintain their initial market position. And one of the Indian instant messaging app found in 2016 was so popular for its funny and cool stickers that every month million users go on it. It was one of the youngest startup which became unicorn in short span of time with a variance of over $1 billion. And but the business could not sustain competition from foreign instant messaging app. It had to shut down its operation in early 2021. And despite being one of the major innovation of Indian communication industry, the simple truth is that the most large scale expenditures designed to create competitive advantage are unlikely to realize a return unless the advantage can be sustained. Okay, so that is the reason. And economists think about this problem as one of creating a or strategically exploiting barriers to entry or mobility barriers. And entry barriers, as defined above, are structural features of a market that enable incumbent companies to raise prices persistently above cost without attracting new entrants. And the entry barriers protect companies inside a market from imitators in other industries. Entry barriers give rise to persistent difference in profit between industries. And although different commentators produce different lists, and almost all sources of entry barriers fall into one of the three following categories. One is product differentiation advantage, absolute cost advantage, and scale related advantage. So product differentiation arises when buyers distinguish the product of one company from that of the another, and are willing to pay a price premium to get the variant of their choice. And such a difference become entry barrier whenever imitators, whether they be new entrant or companies operating in other niches of the same market, and cannot realize the same prices for a otherwise identical product as the incumbent. On the face of it is hard to understand how this might come about, since consumer will always prefer the lower period priced variant of two otherwise identical product. However, if it is costly for consumer to change from purchasing one product to purchasing another, then prices for otherwise identical product can differ for long period of time. And economists all call cost of this type switching cost, and business managers always try to create switching cost by locking consumers into their product. Habit formation is an obvious source of switching cost, and many marketing campaigners are designed to reinforce the purchasing pattern of existing customers and raise their resistance to change. And further, many consumers sink cost into gathering information about new product, and once they have made a choice that satisfied them, they are likely to resist making further investment. Both sources of switching cost are often reinforced by the use of brand names to help consumers quickly find familiar products. The value of these labels depends, of course, on the size of the switching cost that they help to sustain. And finally, switching cost also arise when consumption involves the purchase of highly specified complementary product that lock consumers into existing purchasing pattern. And buyers of a foreign company main frames often found that the large cost of rewriting software and recording data dwarf price or performed differences that might otherwise have induced them to switch to one of its foreign rivals. And absolute cost advantage arise whenever the cost of incumbent companies are below those of new rivals, and they enable incumbent to undercut the price of rivals and without sacrificing profit. So there are many sources of absolute cost advantage, and investment in R&D and learning by doing in production can be important in many sectors, and they can occasionally be protected by patent. Similarly, the privileged access to scarce resources can open up substantial differences in cost between companies producing identical product, and many companies vertically integrated upstream to assure control over limited natural resources, or downstream to assure access to the most valuable distribution channel action that can make entry anywhere in the value chain difficult. Scale related advantage created the most subtle form of entry barriers. They arise whenever a company's cost per unit fall as the volume of production and the sales increases, and economies of scale in production uh, are the most familiar source of scale advantage, but economies can also arise in distribution. And one way or the another, the important implication of scale advantage is that they impede small scale entry, and if cost have as production double, then a small entrant will have cost per unit twice as high as an incumbent twice its size. And as stated above, a few market naturally develop entry barriers, and even when they do, and very few incumbent companies rely on structural features of market alone to protect them. Whether it is creating or exploiting entry barriers, and companies with the profitable market positions to protect usually need to act strategically to deter entry. And although there are as many different examples of strategic entry deterrence, there are at least three type of generic strategies that companies typically employ: sunk cost, squeezing entrance, and raising rival cost. And sunk cost is the displacing incumbents is possibly the most attractive strategy for an entrant to follow, since if successful it enables the entrant both to enter a market and monopolize it, and somewhat more modestly, if an entrant can't at least partially displace an incumbent, it will make more profit after entry than if it has to share the market and on the less equal basis. To deter a entrant from following the strategy, an incumbent needs to lock itself into the market in a way that the raise the cost to the entrant of displacing it, and this usually required the incumbent to make investment whose capital value is had to recover in the event of exit. And sunk cost raise the cost of exit, and some incumbent do this by investing in highly dedicated large scale plant and equipment, since this also enable them to reap economies of scale in production. And these activities also have the additional benefit of creating product differentiation or absolute cost advantage. Next is squeezing entrance, and it is usually all but impossible to deter a very small scale entry, and frequently it is not worth the cost. And however, the capable entrant interested in establishing a major position in the market are much more serious threat, and many entry deterring strategies work by forcing entrant to enter at large scale while at the same time making this too expensive. And next is rising rival cost. Even when an incumbent is sure that it cannot be displaced by an entrant, and it has managed to squeeze the entrant into a tiny niche of an existing market, entry can sometimes be profitable when the market is growing. So indeed, the market growth is an important stimulus to entry, since it automatically creates room for the entrant without reducing the incumbent's revenue. However, the most entrant have only modest financial support, and any strategy that raises cost in the short run and slow the growth of their revenue may make it difficult for them to survive alone and enough to penetrate the market and turn a profit. Okay. And please read this from your IGNOU study material. Okay, this is all about this. And a company is that successful deters entry will have lower profit than a company that did not face a entry threat. But that is not an interesting observation. What matters is that a company that successfully deters entry will preserve it profit, while a company that has not been able to deter entry will see its market position and the profit that it generate gradually disappear. Okay, so this is all about today's session, and for more MBA series you just do like, share, and subscribe our channel. Thank you so much.
i-tutor Academy presents IGNOU MBA Complete Syllabus Coverage Classes for individual students, semester-wise subject with online flexible timing. For more details, contact on +91 623 827 1885